Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. Tonight we're talking about loose ends, all of those wonderful plot points, characters, ideas that came up, got us all excited, and then drifted off to nowhere. So let's have our panelists introduce themselves and we'll get started. Kristin, let's kick it off with you.
Hi, I'm Kristin Jackson. I'm a graphic designer and freelance artist. I've worked in film now for the past 10 years. And I've been working with some of the behind the scenes people of Supernatural for those years. And I've been a fan of the show since the very beginning. And I'm really happy for the opportunity to continue to talk about my favorite show.
Awesome. Michelle?
My name is Michelle Crowley. I am a lecturer of communication studies and popular culture at Northern Kentucky University. And I love joining Gail and the Continual group and talking about Supernatural.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail Z. Martin, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and more. And as Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But one thing that is that holds true for all of my urban fantasy is that they're all pretty much worlds that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the loose ends. What are some of the things that, and we're just going to go kind of popcorn around, whatever comes to your mind. We'll just, free flow this. But early on, one of the things that we saw and then never saw again was Sam doing telekinesis when he moved that wardrobe because Dean was going to get shot. Never happened again. Would have really come in handy a whole lot of times. What's up with that?
Yeah, they kind of dropped that one, that he was a special, the special children, and he had various witchy powers, and then he's just a normal guy afterwards for pretty much season 5 through 15. When did they phase that out? They phased that out early, or fairly early, after they got started with the whole, apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like especially after he went to hell or to the cage, then after that, it was just, oh, he's a normal guy now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, we never saw any of his special children abilities after the whole knockdown drag out with Azazel. Maybe a little bit through Ruby, because she said he didn't need the blood to do what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, after that, after Lilith's death, I'm not sure we saw him do anything anymore. So yeah, that just kind of, I wonder if they thought it was just, was it after Lilith's death, or maybe soon? You're right. Certainly after he got out of the cave.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember. Go ahead.
Well, it was just too much storyline. They had so much to cover that adding that in was just one thing too many. With what they had, all these different balls in the air, and to focus on, they were focusing on the end game at that time, because they were not sure that they were going to get a season 6. So
no,
to just go for the big one and then forget about the smaller ones, the side stories.
Yeah, well, that's what we have fan fiction for. It picks up all these loose ends and then runs all the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other ones that we got teasers of and then they just never came back to them?
For me, I'd love to see more of the Campbells. They had them, I mean, killed off an awful large amount of them, like all at once. But what happened to the rest of them? I'm sure it was a pretty sprawling clan from the looks of things, and if they were all involved in the monster killing side of things, there should have been more cousins out there, and they just kind of brought them in and killed them off and then left that side of the family just hanging out there. So I'm sure there's still cousins that Sam and Dean had somewhere that they never met and may have been in the business. And so I was kind of upset they never explored that further or mentioned it, you know.
They went from having, you know, the Campbell's bunker kind of to the Men of Letters bunker, and we forgot about that side of the family.
Well, and we never saw anything of John's side either, except Henry popping through a closet. But I would have loved to have explored that more and found out, was John's mother still alive? Was she already gone by the time Mary died? If she was alive, he obviously didn't go home, didn't go to her. You know, what was the story there? That would have been.
He was afraid what happened to Mary would happen to his mother.
That could happen, or maybe she didn't deal well with Henry's disappearance, and maybe she drank herself to an early grave. I mean, we don't know these things. Being a Winchester, that's actually pretty likely. We didn't see any of
it is kind of funny that both sides of the family had secrets that big that neither of them knew about. Mary with the Campbells and the monsters, and John with the Men of Letters. So they were both keeping massive secrets and of each side of their families. And it wasn't until
John didn't know. John didn't know Henry was a member of the Men of Letters, did he?
Did he know?
No. Yeah, I didn't think he did, because that was like all around the, you know, his disappearance and whatnot. He just thought that Henry just left.
And
he wasn't, he really wasn't sure, you know, what the deal with his father was, only that he left.
So I don't think John found out until Sam and Dean told him in Lebanon that they came by it, that they were legacies because of him.
Okay.
And he was. But he would have loved, there's something packed into that episode. I would love to have Lord John's real reaction to finding out that his dad didn't actually abandon him. His dad died his own sons. That's gotta do something big for John's self-worth, because Winchesters are huge on abandonment issues, you know, and healing that would be awesome, even if he didn't have a whole lot of time to think about it. All these conversations that would be wonderful. What other loose end? You know, one of the things that came up when we were looking at the finale was Jesse the Antichrist. He would have been a cool ally there, you know, to fight up. He's
in Australia somewhere doing whatever.
He's in the postcard.
Well, apparently he didn't do fires, you know. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Maybe he's in hiding. I mean, I always figured on that, sort of like they ran into problems with Cass, is anytime you have a superpowered character, they're good for certain things, but then they also make it really hard to have tension, because you have superpowered character who can just fix everything. So how is there ever any danger? Oops, they lost their powers. Oops, they're not here. Oops, oops. And I figured Jesse was just too big of a, you know.
Yeah,
they kind of put too many things.
Well, they kind of put those limitations on Jack by him just being so, you know, at first he wasn't sure of himself. He didn't know who he was. He was finding him. So they kind of had breaks on his abilities. They must have thought about, okay, if we're going to introduce this guy, how are we going to do this right from the beginning, so we don't end up in a situation like Cass with he's a human, he's not a human, heaven is losing its batteries, and so we don't have enough juice to send you. And So that kind of got a little far-fetched
Mhm.
a lot of times.
Mhm.
But so, yeah, you're right that Jesse probably would have suffered that same type of thing. I'd be curious though if there would be a follow-up movie, if Jesse could be worked into it, because he'd be like a natural buddy for Jack, somebody of that same age group, super powered. Now what do you do with the rest of your life type of situation. So I'd love to see him back in
He'd
some
have
way.
to
Mhm.
he'd have to be in his late teens, early 20s by now, because he seemed to be around, somewhere in
Like
that 8 to
9,
10 age.
yeah, 9, 10,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He would be the perfect age to kind of guide Jack on, here's how not to blow up the world, in case you're interested.
But he's had, he's if he's still out there, he has years of experience of learning to deal with, just being an omnipotent type of being, or omnipowerful, or whatever. So he'd be able to
But still being cute.
relate to Jack's, very unique problems as a being like that. So.
But Jesse was still human, where Jack's never really been completely human. So Jesse might actually be able to bring more of a perspective of the humanity, because he's dealt with that. Was he a half-breed of some kind? I don't remember. Was he half?
He was a human and a demon.
Yeah.
Human and demon.
Okay.
But
still, having lived with
and then we come to find out later on that most demons aren't that powerful. So it kind of was almost like they realized their mistake when they're like, oh wait, not every demon can be that powerful. So unless he, the demon that was, his sire was maybe Azazel or one of the Prince of Hells or something. Yeah. If maybe that would explain his power, other than, just lonely demon number 3 on the side over here.
Lonely demon number 3. That guy from the final episodes that was trying so hard to be, can I be helpful in some way?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm so bored. Please give me something to do.
Yeah. Well, and the princes of hell are actually another thing that we didn't see, other than Azazel. We didn't really get to see many of them as they got killed. Ramiel, Prince of Hell, and Dagon, and all those. They came, they went, they were gone. I would have loved to have seen more about them.
Give them the highlight that Asmodeus had.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Because I was fascinated with Ramiel, the guy who just wants to go fishing.
Yeah.
So that I thought, okay, there are only so many episodes, but I would have loved to have seen more about them, and maybe a little less about Asmodeus.
Colonel Sanders.
Just rewatch one of them. Colonel Sanders, yeah. Although he did a great job with that part.
Yeah. One thing that,
while we're talking.
Oh, go ahead. Because mine is a completely different diversion. So.
Oh, I was just going to say, while we're talking about superpowered characters, Mrs. Butters, the nymph who did all the holidays and the baking, I was kind of betting on her to come back for the big showdown with Chuck in kind of a Dobby the house elf way, because she reminded me of Dobby, you will not hurt Harry Potter. And I could have seen her coming. She obviously had powers, I could have seen her throwing Chuck around, maybe giving him a milkshake or two to drain his power. I would have loved to have seen more from her since they introduced her and then took her away. I guess she was running around the woods somewhere. But still, great idea. Let's see more of it.
Well, I can tag on to that then, because, one of the things that I think was a dropped, or at least a forgotten storyline was the Fae. You had an entire other world out there of all the fae creatures. And I think that, still the Dean is claimed. He's
By
got a
Oberon.
claim on his soul by the summer court. So I think that that's like something that if there is a movie series, they could do lots of movies dealing with types of fae in addition to the vampires and the werewolves and the demons, the angels, and to explore that side of things. They gave it a couple of shots and 2 episodes, and I guess Miss Butters would count for 3 for fae. And after that, they kind of are a missing element that really could be explored in future stories.
Going off with that and just seeing other things in pop culture is that really we don't see a lot of the fae realm. I mean, you'll see leprechauns, of course, you have your Lucky Charms leprechauns and whatnot, or Fighting Irish, and you have your Tinkerbell pixies. But for the most part, we don't talk about any of the realms of the Celtic or the Druidic or any realms of fairy throughout most of pop culture.
Yeah.
Well, Jim Butcher in the Harry Dresden files delves into the fae realm pretty deep. And Laurel K. Hamilton had fae that she did a whole series with. But you're right, it is more likely to show up in books than in movies.
Because it's so complicated. I mean, the entire fairy courts are, it's a soap opera. And if you didn't start watching it back in 1965, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And
immortal soap opera.
Yeah. Since they introduced that world into the world of the vampires and the werewolves and the demons and so they have given us the opportunity to explore more if they chose to. And I'd love to see more stories that feature that aspect of supernatural storytelling.
And once again, fan fiction has our back. I've read some really interesting fae-based stories where Oberon collects on that claim, and Sam has to come rescue Dean from the fairy court, and that held very true to the fairy lore about the longer you stay, the more you forget yourself, and the harder it is to come back. And it was very well done. So yeah, they could definitely run with that and go in some interesting directions. For that matter, there were a lot of creatures that we never saw much more of, and they should have had a bigger footprint in the story, like the Alpha Vamp and those people. If they were that powerful, you'd think we'd have kept running into them or seen more traces of them.
Yeah.
I think though, going on off of that, it's kind of like with the Jessie. So if you have a character that is all powerful, or like they used to be called like the Deus Ex Machina type characters, where do you go with that? I mean, you start off with something that is so overpowered. Where do you go from, where do you go? So that might be one of the reasons that the Alpha Vamp was, they put the lid on him for a while, because it's like, well, if he's everywhere, he's going to be the big bad. And we're really not making the show about, what is his name?
True.
Well, he had to go run the magic school and the magicians. He had another job.
Exactly. I almost called him Dean Fogg, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not his name.
All these people moonlight, Well, for that matter, Asmodeus wanted Jack to raise the Shadim. And we got really cool, creepy guys with bad fingernails coming out of the ground. And then we never even got to see a whole Shadim. Shazam, something.
Shazam.
What is this singular?
Yeah.
Shadim sounds plural. But you know, again, it did get pulled from lore, just like so much of the show, you know, had a basis in lore. I would have loved to at least had an episode where they had to confront them, other than, oh, not you, back in the hole.
Yeah, and since all the souls were coming out of hell when God opened the gates,
Mhm.
why didn't they escape too? I mean, it was like a free for all. You know,
Mhm.
souls flying out like, you know, 4th of July. So wouldn't that kind of presuppose that other, you know, because if you know, all the souls escaped, all the demons could kind of just walk out, then why not that type of creature too that was down there? So it just seemed, it was like, okay, they have enough on their hands to deal with the ghosts
Mhm.
and the evil spirits. We don't need to throw in all that extra all that extra stuff too.
Well, that was sort of like, you know, they kind of started down the route of all the creatures that you killed are back.
Mhm.
And that, you know, they did finally send them packing when uh, Rowena jumped in and closed the, you know, the crevasse. But, you know, I kind of felt like, okay, you started us on this and we've got about 5 ghosts, but where's everybody else? Or even other instances of some of those creatures, because there's more than one woman in white. There's more than one phantom traveler. You know,
Mhm.
they all kind of have their own stories, which actually the anime tackles both of those stories with a really different twist.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
it's the same monster, but they've got a little different backstory, and it all works differently, which is really kind of fun.
Mhm. Another thing that I kind of missed is that the presence of law enforcement, if it, you know, going from the extreme of
Mhm.
the fae and supernatural side of the storytelling on this end, the real life law enforcement and having to keep, you know, running from the law and trying to keep things under wraps to the normal human side of things, they kind of lost some of that being always on somebody's wanted list, even though some of that was kind of mitigated by the fact that they were thought to be dead, but they were still out there doing various things. So at some point you would think that the law enforcement were like, hey, maybe we got rid of those 2 guys like 5 years ago, but we've got these other 2 guys that seem to be doing the same things. So I kind of thought that,
Copycat.
yeah, copycat. So they kind of dropped that need to have Sam and Dean always kind of keeping one eye looking over their shoulder, not just for the various monsters, but the, you know, the guys with the badges, you know.
Maybe that
Especially,
was done just for story simplicity, because you know you got one eye over your shoulder for vampires and one for the feds. It's like, what else do they have time for? They're constantly running.
yeah.
Well, it could have been interesting. You know, Henriksen had a lot of character potential, and
Yes.
he was their enemy, but he was their enemy for all the reasons that he should have been, not knowing who they actually were and what they did. And right before he died, he figured that out. It
Mhm.
would have been great even to have him as the inside man who was running interference for them in Washington or at Central, going, oh yeah, I'll take care of those guys. No, I get all those cases, and
Mhm.
kind of protect them on the inside. That could have been really interesting, and also kept a very competent, very interesting character of color in the story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, to kind of have like a little X-Files element, just like the Men of Letters was on the supernatural side, kind of behind the scenes, looking out for things. You could have had one on the normal vanilla human side, looking out for things in Washington, like in X-Files. I mean, that'd be a fascinating extra dimension to the story. They could have,
Mhm.
you know, not necessarily had entire episodes devoted to it, but oh yeah, we got this guy back in DC and he's with the CIA and he's making sure that our facial recognition is kind of not showing up on the tapes, or you know,
He
so to
deletes
have
all
like
our
a Donna.
files. Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I would have loved to have seen more of Missouri Mosley. You know,
Oh
she was
gosh,
only
yes.
in 2 episodes.
Yes.
Wasn't
And she was
didn't the
in,
actress fall ill? Isn't that why she wasn't able to continue?
I don't know, that's the case with Meg, with Rachel Miner.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I didn't hear that about the actress with Missouri Mosley, and that could be. But and again, one of those characters who looms so big in fan fiction that you forget she was barely in the show, like
Mhm.
Pastor Jim and Caleb and some of those that they show up in all these stories, and you're going, wait, they were mentioned. This guy died in the only episode he was mentioned in. We never saw him again, but he's in all this fanfic.
Mhm.
But Missouri was so interesting, and you'd think they'd run into more people with psychic ability who would not be bad guys, but would recognize them and help or know they were coming or something.
Mhm. Yeah, there's that whole small town here in Florida that's like a psychic town. Um, there, I can't remember the name. It's
Well,
to
in
the
Lilydale,
south, and
New York.
so yeah, I mean there'd be people out there that could be, tangentially plugged into this otherworldly community, and we only really saw, the hunter side of things, but there'd be other people out there aware of all of this who would make interesting characters, um, that I
Well,
kind of
every
think.
little town you go to has a sign, psychic.
Yeah. Yes.
Really, some of them are real-ish.
Mm, yeah, Madame Ruby. You have those,
Mhm,
yeah, reading the tarot cards and all of that. So they could have, I mean,
mhm,
yeah, fan fiction has included a lot of storylines like that and characters like that,
yeah.
but maybe because they got so caught up in the angels and the demons and the heaven and hell, they kind of dropped some of those other more, I hate to say grounded, but grounded types
Mhm,
of things that we personally can see, like you said, driving down the road, there's the psychic, get your psychic reading here, um that kind of you could maybe relate to a little more because it's
mhm.
out there. What if it actually was real? And you kind of put that thought in your head that you have a little bit of a connection. Um, so I
We
don't know
lost a
that.
lot of that worldly connection, of that sort of thing after
Mhm.
season 5.
Yeah.
So, Kripke era, because he wanted it to be a show about urban legends and road trips, and so yeah, you would find those little small town psychics, and it's like, oh wait, that one's the real deal, and they got some stuff going down. So, but yeah, after Kripke left, it was angels and demons.
Mm. Yeah, they kind of touched
And
on
what
it
the
just with a tiny bit with that one. They found that, I can't remember what episode it was, but it was they went and they found that cursed object that was like behind the in the back of the store of
That
a
was a
pawn
Leviathan
shop or
episode.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they kind of touched on it, that there are these practitioners that are out there, but they just never really, connected to that type of story, like you said, after Kripke left.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I understand that, they probably, hello Kitty, they probably needed some bigger arc to keep going as long as they did. But looking back, I wish they'd have broken up the whole heaven and hell thing a little more with some of those earthly stories. I would love to know what all is in John's storage unit up in Buffalo. And pardon me, that cursed teddy bear that they took from the guy who stole the hunter stuff in the Lebanon episode. Sam wanted to pull the string. I kept going, what happens if you pull the string? you know, Probably nothing good. And Cuthbert Sinclair with his underground magic collection of stuff. I really wanted to know who he was and what he did. And he showed up twice more with the Werther box, and he showed up a little bit in season 15 with kind of a hologram with Mrs. Butters, but oh man, what was in his collection? And who was feeding his zoo after Dean killed him? Did they just eat each other? What happened?
And what happened to all the artifacts that he had collected as well? I mean, it seems like that, the stuff that the men of letters thought was too dangerous, he just took home. So what do we, there was an episode in, I think it was season 13, I think, where you had the demon Bart was looking for his bones, and this collector had them, and the collector was immortal, and that, like that whole, like, there's got to be more than just, him and Cuthbert. Like, there has to be more people like that. I want to see that. I want to see that side of things.
Yeah.
I'd also like to know more about Sam's buddy that we saw in episode 1 and then never saw that guy again.
Brady?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Brady. It was the guy that was that they were drinking with at the bar, and he's the one that says, "Oh yeah, you got the 174," and just like we never saw him again. Or was he ever mentioned again?
Well, and Kristin and I were talking about, what about all the other men of letters chapter houses, and what was in them, and where were they, and did Sam and Dean ransack them and bring them all back to the bunker, or are they just sealed up out there for somebody to find? Would have loved to have had more stories like the one about the Lovecraftian monster and the flapper. Yeah, that was such a great story because it took us someplace that kept us asking, ooh, and what else is in there?
We also got to see other people, just normies running around saying, all right, we have this supernatural thing we got to keep under wraps. And, it's our legacy to do this. And yeah, it kind of just ties back in with that, kind of that small town, like, yeah, we know this stuff is going on, but we don't talk about it.
So if the men of letters, if everybody had died in that one bunker, what pulled away all the other people back to England or Europe or whatever? So if the America was abandoned, why were all the other places abandoned too, across the board? What happened that pulled everybody out and left the empty places that were just never came back to? So yeah, there was like a whole missing story that could just be done only on the men of letters. Have a supernatural, colon men of letters type, for a storyline. Like instead of Avengers colon Endgame, it'd be supernatural men of letters, and we get all those stories. I'd be tuned in for that. I'd love that. So what else?
I would have loved to have seen all those things. What else? Because over the period of time, there certainly were plenty of things that were brought up, and then they just sort of ran out of gas. Balthazar's comment that souls that had been to hell couldn't go to heaven. Since when? John came back from hell and went to heaven. Dean and Sam both had been sent to heaven and got in. Bobby was rescued from hell and sent to heaven, and we know he was there because we saw him at the end. Did Balthazar just lie? Which he could have, and somebody could have said, well, he just made that up. Some of those fix-its, like the voicemail, that's kind of the infamous one. Did Sam ever find out that Dean really didn't say that? And was it Zachariah that changed it? Was it Ruby that changed it? That would take 2 sentences to fix, and we'd have loved to have seen it.
Yeah, that was like a plot hole.
Because poor Sam, he still thinks that one of these days Dean's gonna whack him because he said he would. I mean, I think by now he might have figured out he's over it, but that would have been great to see them actually hash that out. We got a bit of a fix with the Samulet with the musical episode.
Mhm.
and then it actually showing up with Chuck. But I think we all wanted a little more brotherly conversation around that.
Mhm.
You mean you've had it all these years? Why, yes, but again,
Yeah.
fan fiction has taken care of it nicely, but it would be nice in canon.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, what was that? There was the whole fan fiction, what was it called? Redemption Road, where the fans rewrote the entire season. What was it, season 7? They were so upset that they just rewrote the entire season. They had like a writer's room. They had weekly episodes. I think they did the full 22 season arc and just
I'm gonna
rewrote
have
it
to
like
look
they
at
would
that
have
one.
preferred it to see. I thought it was great. That
Mhm.
was it. But the things that we should be able to see without having to resort to fan fiction, like the Samulet.
Mhm.
Just take care of it, like you said, a couple of lines and solve it so that we don't have to go and write whole stories about how it got back to them.
I wish they would release all the stuff that was on the cutting room floor.
Oh yeah.
Like that. I mean,
Mhm.
we've heard about things over the years that, oh yeah, that was explained, but they cut that part out. It's like, I want to see that. Like, especially now, like what are you
Mhm.
gonna do? Like it's over and done. Like let's see this now.
Mhm.
Let's see what happened.
Well, maybe we'll get flashbacks if they actually do go back and do movie of the week or miniseries or something. Maybe we'll get some of those as flashbacks. That would be cool.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because that way it's all good material. They wouldn't have
Mhm.
to reshoot anything. And especially if it's a flashback to a younger self, you would want the actual younger self. I don't think the guys
Mm.
can pull off their 20s. I mean, just looking at the first seasons, I'm like, oh my God, they were babies.
Mm-hmm.
They were children. So yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to see some of that untapped potential of what was left out of some of those episodes. In the final version.
Even Dean talking more or having cases that come up related to what he did while Sam was at Stanford. Again, things that fan fiction have done, but there have been storylines where he was off in New Orleans doing something, or John sent him to go do something, and now 5 years later that entity is back or something related to that is back. And so now there's this whole discussion between Sam and Dean on, yeah, well, you were off being college boy, but I was doing this and this is what happened. And, there's some real great fodder there.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, with Sam, did he really leave all of it that much behind that, was there ever a haunting near campus? Was there ever something that he knew how to step in and fix? Did he ever have to pick a lock? I mean, how did it color his Stanford experience? Because you don't just go from being a homeless kid living in no-tell motels to an Ivy League college seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
How did he learn to do that? You don't, even when there aren't monsters involved, there's a story there. It would have been great to have touched on. I did that a little bit with the shapeshifter one where he goes back and sees some of his friends,
Mm-hmm.
but it would have been interesting to
Yeah.
hash some of that.
Yeah, some sort of clarification on how he made the jump out and what he was doing to get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he was filing his own paperwork, so he must have been a pretty studious kid. But in order to be, you'd have to be sitting in one place for a while to gather all the materials for a college application. So,
And a file for FAFSA.
there was, yeah. So he had to have something going on that was able to get him from that motel to college freshman.
Yeah,
So.
which isn't easy even when you're in a stable middle class home.
Mm-hmm.
That's an ordeal. So yeah, so many unanswered questions. And folks, we are actually coming up to the end of our time. I think we could have a part 2 with this. But for now, we need to wrap things up. So please tell everybody where they can find you online. Kristin?
I'm on I'm on Twitter mostly. So at Anicat, ANICAT. That's where you'll find me hanging out most often. And if you do follow me, then you'll probably end up getting a lot of film related tweets. So be prepared for links to writers like Gail and retweets for writers and script writers in film.
Cool. And Michelle?
You can find me on Twitter at preheatingprof. And I really can't tell you what I'm going to tweet. It just kind of comes out sometimes.
I'm usually more lively on Facebook, and I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group as well as the Supernatural track here at Continual. But on Twitter, I'm at Gail Z. Martin and at Morgan Bryce Author, at Morgan Bryce Book, and I retweet an awful lot of Supernatural stuff as well as book stuff. So folks, thank you very, very much for being with us. We'll definitely come back and revisit this topic. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll have more Supernatural here on Continual. See you in the group.